So we're now going to move on to some questions that we have from our students. We asked some of our students sort of some questions to ask you. First of all, starting right at the back, what GCSEs and A-levels did you take from the offset?
I took, I had 10 GCSEs, so you're really stretching my memory here on exactly what they were. I know they were all three sciences. So I had biology, chemistry, physics. I had economics in there, geography, what else? I have French and Spanish, English and maths, obviously. I don't know how many that I counted up to, but that's pretty much it. And for A-levels, I had geology, biology, and environmental science.
And I guess the kind of those choices that you made, what was your decision around kind of, especially the A-levels?
Yeah, for the A-levels, I knew in particular I enjoyed the sciences, so biology, geology was interesting to me. Environmental science at the time wasn't really greatly of interest, but it lined up okay with the others. What I would say is that there's a key point when you are 16 to 18, which is at that time in your life, you do become quite aware of relationships in your life. And for me personally, I had really strong results in my GCSEs, and actually I was predicted 3 A's for my A-levels, but I succeeded in getting 2 C's and a D. Not because I lost my intellect, but because I lost my focus. And I think it's really easy to do, whether it's relationships or sport or whatever the other distraction is. And I would say of all the things in my academic career that I regretted, it was taking my eye off the ball for those 2 years, because it may well have steered a different path and made it easier for me actually further along the line.
So kind of when you left college, etc., first of all, did you know what you wanted to do? But also, I know you said you went to university, and what did you study there, and where did you go?
Yeah, I went to Southampton University, and I studied geology. I'd enjoyed my A-level. I enjoyed the outdoors nature of that. I like the fact you actually got to go and see different places, and it involved a bit of investigation. So trying to work out from the surface what's apparent on the surface, what's going on beneath. There's a little bit of chemistry and science in there that I also quite enjoyed. But really, being honest, I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I enjoyed being outdoors. I knew I enjoyed working as part of a team, but that was about it. And so, as I said earlier, the way I ended up in the police was simply a second application form arrived for my housemate. And I didn't mention earlier, but I did some work experience when I was growing up, which was with the East Sussex Fire Service. And they were really good to me. So emergency services, I'd always held an interest in. When I saw my housemate apply, I thought, why not? That's going to be interesting too. And sure enough, it proved to be.
And what was your kind of, as you were growing up as a child, what was your dream job, would you say? Because everyone kind of looks forward and says, yeah, that will be my dream job. What was yours?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would say the work experience had a strong influence on me. I have great admiration for the fire service, still do, in fact. And I always thought being a fire officer would have been fantastic.
Yeah. Did you have any jobs while you were kind of, as we know, kind of once you go into college and you start to become old enough to sort of work at places? Did you have any jobs where you kind of through college or university that you did?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact age, 15, 16 maybe, I started working in a fish and chip shop. That was just along the road from where my parents lived, and that was a good job. It was hard work, but it taught me the importance of keeping food places clean and customer service. There were loads of people that came back, and it had a really good reputation, so I saw how that worked. I think I also worked at Woolworths. So that taught me about working on the tills and managing money and customer complaints and how to store things in a warehouse, how important it was that there was accurate stock takes and things like that. So yeah, lots of different things.
So a little kind of moving on to sort of the questions from the students about kind of the police kind of force now. How hard was it when you were as a police officer?
Yeah, I mean, at certain times, very tough. I had quite a wide range of different skills. I worked on the front line for 6 years in Brighton, both on beat patrol and in response cars. I had a specialism there as a sexual offences investigation officer, so dealing with fairly horrific incidents and taking statements from very distressed people. that taught me a lot about empathy, and also masses about attention to detail. You know, listening carefully, writing things in a very professional way. That taught me a lot. And I would say, yeah, tough working shifts, tiring. You know, having to keep fit and deal with, you know, fairly tough incidents physically and mentally, but also just the best place in the world for making friends. You know, your team and your colleagues, because I think similarly to in the military, you genuinely rely on each other to look after your life and well-being. Just the bonds that brings are phenomenal. Still have lots of friends who I met 30 years ago, you know, 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned earlier about your kind of route into the police force. You kind of, your housemate sort of had two applications form and you did it. But another question from the students was that, have you ever had to use your baton?
Yeah, only once. I had a case where we were dealing with some football fans who had unfortunately drunk a bit too much at one of the pubs in Brighton, and myself and another group of officers were on what's called a public order duty. So we had helmets and shields, and we'd been asked to clear the pub. And after we cleared the pub, some of the fans ran up a hill behind the back of the station, and we were following them up to make sure they moved away from the area. Unfortunately, one of them had ducked into an alleyway before I realised where he was, and he hit me around the back of the head with a metal pole. And yes, I hit him on his knee with my baton to make sure that he was subdued, and that was that. But only the one time in 10 years, so not a bad record.
Yeah. And if you kind of, would you, you know, in your career now, you've gone past the sort of police force, but would you ever go back to the police force at all? Would you?
Yeah, I didn't leave because I disliked it. I had passed my sergeant's exam. I was due to go back to the front line, but unfortunately I damaged my knee quite badly playing hockey on the weekend, and it meant that I was unable to run for a very long time. Really, what I loved about the place was going front line. Whilst I had an administrative job there, I didn't really want to stay working in a back office. I wanted to be out client facing, for want of a better term.
Yeah. And how long were you in the police force for?
10 years. So 6 years in Brighton and 4 years in the States of Guernsey, in the Channel Islands.
And what made you sort of, how did you end up in Guernsey?
Yeah, most of my family actually are from Guernsey. I saw an opportunity within one of the police magazines about a position coming up over there. So I applied for it, got the transfer, and that was that.
Okay. And have you got any objects there I believe you might have an object there you can show us from your time in the police?
Yeah, sure. Unfortunately, I don't let you keep your baton or handcuffs or anything, but that's the police helmet. So there we go. And just to prove how fair and ethical the police force is, after 10 years of service, I had to buy that to keep it, so that there wasn't any hint of theft or anything like that.
Yeah. So the kind of moving on then, when did you start kind of building? So you kind of did the police force. How then did it kind of start to build the kind of where you are now?
Yeah, so when I left the police force, effectively I knew that I was going to have to start a new career, and I can tell you that was a very frightening time in my life. I'd sold my house in Guernsey. I'd moved back to England because actually my work as a police officer was my license to stay in the housing market in Guernsey. You couldn't do it without. So the big decision for my wife and I, we came back, we used some of the money from the sale of our house to buy a franchise and basically buy the license to trade under that. I was trained by a company called Action Coach in business coaching. I was with them for about 10 years. And during that time was when I partnered into the marketing businesses.
Right. Okay. So moving on, kind of then the students have asked next is so what do you need to build a business? We've got students at our school with that kind of ambition of building and owning their own business. What kind of things would you need or skills would you need for that?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to answer that slightly differently, if that's all right, because I think that question, what do you need, is in one sense the reason why a lot of businesses aren't successful. Right. What you've got to work out is, what does society need? What do customers need? So if you understand what it is that they need, if you can create the answer to that with your skill set or with resources you have, then your business is much more likely to be successful. So you think about dentistry, people have painful teeth. They don't like having painful teeth. How do you improve on that? Well, healthy mouth. How do I give someone a healthy mouth? And that's basically the skills of dentistry. Likewise for catering, people don't like to cook for themselves. They like to celebrate and enjoy good food that they can't create for themselves. That's catering, and so on and so forth. Why do business coaches exist? Because most people aren't ever trained in how to run a business. And I think that's the key part. If you're going to start a business, don't start with you, start with them.
Okay. So what skills did you pick up from your first job when you started? I think you mentioned about working in a fish and chip shop. What sort of skills did you learn from that?
Yeah, definitely customer service. So, recognizing that people like to be greeted. They don't like incorrect orders, so you have to listen carefully. They definitely don't like it if you don't give them the correct change. Using the tills, making sure that there was sufficient stock of fish and chips and burgers and whatever, making sure that was always kept up to speed, and you didn't run out of things because that didn't go down well. The importance of cleanliness and tidiness and hygiene, and the value that, in particular, that business owner put on it. I mean, in retrospect, he was fastidious about it, really detailed about how clean it was. I think what a great ethic to have for your workplace when it involves food.
Yeah.
Lots of little things.
What can you? So another one, kind of from the students, is what can they do that enable them to run their own business? So again, kind of we looked at the skills and sort of seeing about what businesses want, etc. But what can they do to make them more kind of astute in terms of that kind of pathway?
Yeah, I think when you start out in business, unless you are exceptionally lucky, you're unlikely to have a big pot of cash behind you. So often what that's going to involve is going and seeking investment from somebody that has money. And what I can tell you is that investors don't like guesswork. They really want to see that the business owner is coming to them with a plan, and that they've actually estimated how many sales they're going to make and how the profit is going to be made. And most importantly, from the investor's perspective, how they're going to pay back the money they borrowed, and perhaps a bit more as a reward for the loan in the first place. So whether that's a bank or a private investor, what they don't like is guesswork. So I think putting a plan together, as with everything in your life, whether that's planning for revision or planning to build a house or anything, planning and forethought is really important. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay. And how well do you work with your colleagues, and how much do you work with your colleagues as well?
Well, up until the start of pandemic, I would have said I work with them an awful lot. Having said that, I still speak with them almost every day. Really, that's from a management perspective, just to check in and make sure they're doing okay and they don't need any extra support, but also just at the human level. I think with the way pandemic is at the moment, we're still all working from our home addresses, so we're doing it all via phone or Skype or whatever. But moving forwards, we will definitely make sure that we draw our team back together so they gel and stay in good contact with one another.
Yeah, no, good. Kind of onto sort of money things now that the students have asked, and it's kind of this is where the students would ask these sort of questions. How much money do you make?
Now, Graham, if that was you, I'd tell you to be ever so much more polite. But bearing in mind, I know that's coming from your students. It actually really varies from year to year. Because I'm a business owner, I don't get paid a wage. I basically earn from the profit of the company, and partly that's down to how well the company is going and what the market is, but also whether we're making investments and things. So if you're buying a new business property and putting lots of money back in, you might not take quite so much out for yourself. In round terms, anywhere between about, let's say, 40,000 and 120,000 a year. It depends on what we're doing each year and how well. This year, I suspect, will be in the middle of that rather than the top, just because of the pandemic.
Yeah, no, exactly. And what kind of what was a minimum wage when you started working? I know now it's around sort of kind of up to the near the £10 mark. But what was it when you were?
I'm not sure, but I seem to remember about £3.50 when I very first started Woolworths. I seem to think it was about that level. Better on a Sunday, I remember that.
Yeah. Next thing then, kind of, I guess the police force is a certain kind of sector. How did you get involved in sort of the creative industry?
Yeah, actually, when I was running my coaching business, I think you develop creativity on how to make businesses operate in different ways and how to motivate staff. But I also think one of the things I really learned was I loved understanding why people bought, the psychology of sales and how marketing works and whether it would influence someone, whether they'd react to it or not. And that led me to work with quite a few marketing companies. Generally, I just found I love their artistic ability. I can't draw for toffee, but I love their artistic ability. But what I did notice was that many of them, whilst they could draw really well, weren't very good at actually creating the message. Now, if you get the message and the imagery together, that's what makes the difference. You know, and ultimately it can look absolutely beautiful, but if the message is wrong, people won't buy. So putting those two things together, I found my skill set with words and influence from largely negotiation skills in the police, strangely enough, were exceptionally useful in that, and match it with their artistic, you created some good things.
No, wow. So kind of then the next thing, obviously during this time that we've had and the whole COVID-19, etc., what skills do you reckon important are to build on now, kind of coming out of this lockdown for students?
Yeah, I think resilience. One of the realities that hasn't quite hit the marketplace, but definitely will within the next 3 months, is that actually certain sectors in particular will be quite scarce on job opportunities, and there will be a lot of people applying for every single role. And I think one of the things you've got to be is tenacious enough to keep going for it, even when you feel a little discouraged. And I also think you need to be resilient enough to learn from the feedback. Always ask for feedback, always. Whether you get the job or don't, always ask for feedback, because you'll learn from it for the next time round. And then I also think, be creative. In fact, my dad this morning sent me a text message, which I think it's on BBC News, might be worth a look, Graham, but it was a guy that won a job, strangely enough, with a marketing agency, because he'd sent a video of like a floating head doing the interview ahead of the interview. Okay. And it was really creative, and the business owner was really blown away by that and hired him on that alone. His CV didn't come into it. And I certainly would agree with that. For my own colleagues, I look at CVs, but I don't judge on CVs. In fact, if somebody was looking at my CV, they'd see 2 C's and a D at A-level, they'd see a degree in geology, and now you're running a business coaching and marketing firm. Tell me the connection. It doesn't work that way. I'm not saying it's not important. It definitely is. It can be the edge that opens the door. But once that door is open, it'll be your personality and your creativity and your fit with their culture that will carry you as far as the grades. I think, as I say, start out by taking a look at the marketplace and seeing what already exists, because a lot of good businesses are out there. And when you start out, if you can learn from what they've put together, it saves you reinventing the wheel every single time. And then say, okay, what are they good at? What are they not good at? Where does the opportunity exist for me to do that better? And then also take a look at what the customers are asking. So one of the interesting things, if you want to know how to create a really good business, is go to what you think is a good business and read the testimonials, because the testimonials will tell you what the customers really care about. And that is always good advice. If you listen to your customers, you stand a really good chance in your company. No,
good. So then in terms of sort of, I know we've looked at some before, but what advice would you give to the students kind of moving forward, going through their time at school and college, etc., moving on to university? What advice would you give to people?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at just jobs for a moment, the simplest thing is that it's very easy just to do what everybody else does, to scattergun your CVs and send it out to lots and lots of people. But also, consider a personal phone call. Make a phone call, call up the HR department, tell them you sent your CV through, you just wanted to check that it had arrived. You just wanted to say how much you really are interested in their company, and tell them something you read on the website to show that you've actually researched it. Do something that makes you stand out from the crowd. Try and be creative, try and demonstrate that enthusiasm. Certainly as an employer, one of the things I look for is do they really, really want this job? Do they actually want to come and work with me, with my team? Have they done anything above just read my job ad and send me a CV? They've done any research? So yeah, learn about it and go and do it that way. And in terms of self-development, try and have something on your CV that doesn't come straight through academics. I know, Graham, for yourself being in as a head teacher, the academics are core, but if you've got something else on there that just tells us a bit about your personality, whether you're captain of a cricket team, whether you have gone and done some presentations, or whether you helped out at a charity, it doesn't matter, something that just gives us an insight into who you are and what you enjoy. That's always a good thing.
Yeah, no, good. And also, I guess now more so than anything, and I think the young students do take part in a lot of social media, but how important do you think social media is in terms of advertising, businesses, etc.?
I think it's massively important in terms of advertising most businesses. If you are in an exceptionally niche or unique thing, you may not need it quite so much, but anything where you are competing, having a strong social media presence and something that looks like, you're current, that you've got the right information, that you're professional, all of those things work. But I also would say it's not just for advertising businesses. Bear in mind, social media advertises you. So when your potential employers are doing their due diligence following an interview, almost universally they'll look at your social media, and almost universally they'll have a read of a few comments or whatever that are on there. So, just bear that in mind. I can tell you a real world story when I was recruiting for the police force, was with a guy who'd gone all the way through the interviews, managed himself fairly well up until the point where we went onto his social media profile and it showed that he was advocating strongly for the illegal use of drugs.
Right.
Strangely enough, didn't get the job, I can tell you. So be aware of what's on your social media profile. Make sure that if you're applying for jobs that there are appropriate pictures, appropriate messages, and if you can, slot something in there that says, I'm really excited about going for a job at today. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's psychology.
No, that's good. So I know a lot of students, when they're sitting in certain subjects at schools, will kind of not make that link to why they need them skills or why they need the certain topics, etc. So is there anything from you, that any examples that something you've learned back at school that you go, actually, I've now put that into practice?
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly say just on the English front, I learned English pretty well. My mum actually is an English teacher, but at the time, I enjoyed it okay. I got some good grades in it, but I didn't realise the importance of it. And later on in life, I now write a lot of content, a lot of blogs. I've written 2 books. I realise now that having a strength in the use of English, ironically, I can't say it, but having that is really, really important. Likewise for maths. I had to have extra lessons for maths in order to pass my GCSE. It is not a natural forte for me at all. But having said that, it's become a forte of mine through practice over many, many years. And it serves me very, very well in the business I now run.
No, excellent. Well, that's the end of the questions, Tim. And if there's anything, kind of the next thing for the students to kind of apply something, what would you kind of suggest, like during this time now, especially for year 11s and maybe year 13s of going through a long summer and all the other year groups as well, if there's an assignment or something they can be getting on with now, what would you suggest? What would you recommend?
I'd say any chance you can get to just go and see businesses in operation. Go and do a day's work experience, a week's work experience would be worthwhile. If you aren't sure what direction you want to go in, a real world story, my cousin my nephew even, is actually undertaking an apprenticeship in one of our businesses. And the reason for that is that a couple of years ago, I spoke with him. He was finishing up his college time. He didn't really know what he wanted to do at all. And he simply said, I'll just go and get a job somewhere doing something, but without any real direction on it. So I said to him, if you aren't sure and you would like to, I can create an apprenticeship role within one of our agencies. And what that will mean is by the time you've completed it, if you want to do that, you'll be in a position where you can, and you'll have gained the skills during that time to do it. And if you don't, and you still want to go and do something else, I shan't hold it against you.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think apprenticeships are a very strong option for people that either know exactly what they want to do and want to get an early way into a business of that type, or perhaps are completely uncertain. Because there's nothing wrong. If you go and do it for a couple of years, you gain those skill sets. It's not just the skill sets for that industry you learn. You learn how businesses work. You learn how to work with your colleagues. Even if you completely switch the path of your career, that experience will stand you much better than a series of random jobs with no
definitely.
And I just wanted to make that point. I think it's a very strong option, particularly with today's economy. The government are going to be backing apprenticeships and other routes into business right now. And I personally think it's really important that students give that serious thought.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Tim. Thank you very much for kind of answering those questions from the students, but also having a chat today to kind of give us your journey and your career path. So on behalf of us as a school, but also East Sussex Careers Hub, I'd like to, express our warm thanks for doing that. So thank you.
You're welcome.